And thank you so much to the Captain and Crew Lounge for putting on an awesome schedule of events for this week. And schedule as well. So this industry is obviously incredibly misunderstood. I think from the outside looking in, it looks like everyone's having the best time traveling the world. But the reality is the long hours and having to live in close quarters can really take its toll on the body and also on the mind. So very thankful to have people like Captain Kelly Gordon here advocating not only for the industry but for well-being. So we'll hand over to Captain Kelly. If I could ask for you to hold your questions to the end. And that's good. Captain Kelly, a round of applause.
So I was sitting at the dock in Nassau, taking a break from running 4 back-to-back charters, and had a couple of days before I had to turn the boat around and go back out and do it again. And my cell phone pinged. And I got a text message that I'd like to share with you. Hey, Cap. I see you're docked in the same marina as I am, and I wanted to run something by you. May I stop by later on? Sure, I said, thinking that he just wanted to come by and visit. Didn't want to let me go. I was able to break away from his hold. Didn't know what to do. This is my first position as a first officer, and I need this on my CV. And he told me that if I quit right before our charter, he will blackball me so bad that I'll never get another job in this industry. He says, I don't know what to do. This has me so anxious and so depressed. I wish this was the only story like this that I had to share with you, but it's not. Day after day, I receive text messages, Instagram messages, LinkedIn messages, TikTok messages. Here's another. Are you in town, Cap? Meaning Nassau. Both myself and this crew member ran really busy or worked on really busy charter boats. I said, I'm not. I'm on charter, but what's up? How are you? She says, I'm a mess. I've been on charter for 6 weeks straight and just got back from the hospital after having some sort of allergic reaction. Just as I came back aboard, the first thing that my chief stew asked me was if I could get on the heads and beds, and it was about time that I got back to the boat because I had caused her to get so behind on her own work. When I asked her to let me get settled, and I'd jump in just a few minutes, she threatened that I had taken enough time off board, and if I didn't get back to work immediately, she would tell the captain. I thought about going straight to the captain myself, but I knew that this wouldn't work, as I had before. And well, she's the captain's girlfriend. We all know how that goes. I decided to take a few minutes to myself anyhow, grab a quick drink. She came down to the crew mess where I was, told me that if I didn't get back to the heads and beds right away, that I'd be in serious trouble. She swatted at me, knocking the drink out of my hand. Cap, I just crumbled. I was tired, missed my family, didn't feel well, didn't get any real answers about what was going on while I was at the doctor. I just feel like I should tie some weights to my ankles and jump overboard. That's what she told me. This one really gets me. She says, I know we don't really know each other other than through social media, but I wanted to ask you about something. Sure, go ahead. She says, have you ever experienced sexual harassment or assault as a female captain? I said, yeah, I have. She said, I've been working on boats since I could walk. Being a captain has been a lifelong goal of mine since I was tiny. My dad was a captain. The chief mate that's been on this boat been on here forever, couldn't stand the fact that he was passed over and I was promoted to captain and not him. He told me, I'll get even and I'll make you wish you'd never gotten to the top. He and the rest of the crew went out for drinks one night. I stayed back on board. He came back early. He broke into my cabin. You know the rest of the story. She says, how do I handle something like this emotionally and mentally? Is this just something that I'm going to have to accept that happens if I want to be a part of this industry? Is what she asked me. The reasons that I am here today is because, one, over 50% of crew have indicated that they've thought about leaving the industry because of instances like this and because of the deterioration that it has caused to their mental health. Two, because every single time I have a conversation like this with a crew member, whether it's at the dock, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on the phone, or it's an email, and they share these stories with me, and I ask them, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you speak up? They say to me the same thing. The response is the same every single time. Well, I was afraid of getting fired. I was afraid that if I spoke up, that I'd be blackballed. I was afraid that if I said something, I'd never get a job on another boat. Every single crew member had the same answer. And the third reason is because it's happened to me. It happened to me not that long ago. It happened to me as a captain. And it happened to me by one of my crew members. I haven't told anybody this. I wasn't so sure I wanted to share this story. And as I was writing my speech over the last month, I said to myself, you don't need to share this story. But my engineer who's here with me reminded me that you're very open. You just say it like it is, and you share it to keep it as real. I took my crew out to the beach one day for a morale day, I like to call it. I run a dry boat, so my crew don't drink. Every so often, they'll have a couple beers or they'll have a couple drinks. This one particular crew member had a couple too many drinks. We're at a little beach bar, and as we're getting ready to leave in front of God knows everybody, he pulls my bikini top off. And my boob is here for the world to see. And it hit me like a ton of bricks when he did that. And I knew then and there, as far as I am into my career, and as what I think a respected captain, if this is happening to me by one of my own crew members, that the stories that I've been hearing from the rest of the crew members, they're true. And they have a lot of validity to them. Now, I'm sure that some of you have worked on vessels that haven't had any issues like this. But I think that the reality is probably not that many of you. And there's something that I want to point out about the 3 stories that I just shared with you, is that 2 out of 3 of them have a very common theme, and it's alcohol. And as I was going through my mental Rolodex of stories the last month or so, thinking of which ones were the most profound to me, which ones had the greatest effect on me, which were the most profound, and which ones I wanted to share, it was hard. It was really, really hard to find a story that didn't have alcohol in it. In fact, 59% of crew members say that drug and alcohol abuse has had some sort of negative mental effect on their mental health on board. We've got to do better, folks. We've got to do better. Now, I know that these instances, such as burnout, fatigue, isolation, loneliness, sexual abuse, bullying, drug and alcohol abuse, the size and gender discrimination, all of these issues, they're not just in yachting. They're in every other industry that you can think of. Every industry, every profession has their host of issues. We're not alone in that. But what I do think is different about our industry is the fact that we live together, work together, eat together, play together. At the end of the day, we're supposed to go in this little box that we call a room, and we're supposed to share that with somebody And there's a really good chance that the person we're sharing it with is probably someone that's been the bully on board that we work with all day long. So there's a good chance that the way that we live and work and play together provides a good recipe for an amplification of these issues and an even more negative effect on our mental health. When I was looking up some statistics, and I'm a chemist before I was a yacht captain, so I said, well, if I'm going to talk, I need to have some proof here, and I need to have some oomph behind it. So I pulled a study that was done specifically for the super yacht sector, 2 of them actually, and 53% of crew said that they have definitely seen a decline in their mental health since they have joined the industry. That's over half of people that have said since they started this as a career or since they made a career change into the industry, they've seen a decline in their mental health. 23% of them said in some form or fashion they've encountered bullying. I have too. Now, the beauty of my position is that when you're a toxic crew member, I can remove you. But when you're junior crew, you don't always have that. 47% of crew surveyed in this study ,125% is the increase in calls that they saw, not in a year. It's the increase they saw in 1 quarter. So from the last quarter of 2022 to the first quarter of 2023, they saw a 125% increase in their calls. So I decided that I needed to say something. So all of this and what I'm hearing and my experience. And then late last year, I think a lot of us know that we lost a crew member to suicide. And I felt that I needed to say something. I didn't know what it was that I wanted to say, but I needed to address it. And I've grown to have a little bit of a voice in the industry, and I'm not afraid to say anything. So I thought, well, I've got this voice, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to say something. And I just said, guys, we know that we've lost a crew member, but I just want to remind you of something. We're all fighting a battle. We're all, every single one of us sitting here today, big or small, are fighting a battle in our own head. So if you can be anything, be kind. Be kind. Treat your crew members like you would your mom or your dad, your brother or your sister, or your best friend. That's all I said. I did not expect to get the response that I did. And I did not expect the yachting director of Lloyd's Register to comment on my post. And when I looked and saw him on there, I was like, oh dear, what does he want? What did I say? And he said, your statement is simple, but it's profound. You have a voice and you need to run with this. You need to do something. I said, okay. So it got me thinking. I go about my months working. I'm at the Miami Boat Show. And my first officer comes in and says, hey, Cap, there's a couple guys standing on the swim platform saying that they want to come in and talk to you, that they know you. I said, all right, buddy, who is it? We were there. The boat was for sale, so we had a lot of people in and out. He says, well, something about Flag State and class, Lloyd's? I was like, oh God. I thought for a second, what did I do? Am I in trouble? Did I forget something? And then I was like, oh, well, I'm US flagged and I'm reading class, so I don't have to worry about it. So I said, let him in. So this was Engel, I'm sure I'm gonna butcher his last name, Jan de Boer of Lloyd's Yachting Division, and Pete Southgate of Cayman Island Flag State. And they wanted to come in and sit and have a talk. We sat at the salon table at the Miami Boat Show for an hour and a half, talking about the whys, the whos, the hows. And we got to the who. And at the end of our conversation, we said, who has the ability to make the greatest change and the biggest difference? And we decided, and actually determined, after then this kind of put me on another quest where I went around talking to various crew members of all ranks, management companies, different positions within the yachting industry, and we determined that it was the captain and it was management that had the greatest ability to make a change. So think about this. Captains and managers are the direct link in between crew and the owner. So we've got the biggest ability and probably the biggest moral obligation to be making sure that we're working towards a better space for our crew members and that we're properly training the owners. I always say there needs to be an owner training school before they buy a boat. Now, what I found interesting is when I spoke to numerous captains and management companies or just individual managers about why they didn't say anything. Why, when issues were brought like this to them, why didn't they escalate it? Why didn't they do something about it? Well, take the case of a boat that has a captain and then a management company or just a single manager in between them and the owner. They don't want to go to management because they're afraid of making waves. They're afraid if they make too many waves and they make too many difficulties for management company, well, the easiest thing to do is just find a reason to replace that captain and get a new one. The management companies, they didn't want to say anything to the owners because, well, we got bills to pay. We got food to put on the table. There's a good chance that this is a client that they've had for 20 years. They've got 3 or 4 boats that they're managing for them. And so the similarity between when I talk to crew other than captains and management, and then when I talk to captains and management, when I said, well, why don't you say anything? The reason was the exact same. Essentially, we're afraid of getting fired. That's no way to live. That's no way to be in an industry. That's can't afford to live in an industry based on fear of saying something, the right thing, morally and ethically doing the right thing, because we're afraid of getting shit canned. We can't live like that. There's no paycheck, no amount of money, no position that's worth allowing to have a negative deterioration or effect on our mental health. We have an obligation to say something and to do something. And it only takes one. It only takes one to speak up, to say something, and we're going to notice a domino effect. We're going to see that change. So some of you are probably sitting there thinking, I know there's some crew here and people other than management thinking, well, what if the captain or the management company is the issue? What if the captain is the one that's the pervert? What if the management company is the one that's the bully? What if the management company is the one that's been this boat for 20 plus years? Or what if the captain and the management company have been friends for 20 plus years? What if it's them? Then what do you do? That's a sticky situation because there's no doubt that there's an abuse of power in this industry. You have to escalate it. You have an obligation to do so. But before you do, think about this. And I can speak, so while I'm picking on captains, I can also speak out for us too. And I can say, before you escalate that issue, one, give them, the captain or the management company, the professional courtesy of going to them first and asking them. Could just be as simple as something as, why you been stopping around the boat so grouchy for the last couple of weeks? My crew asked me when I got my resting boat face on what my problem is, you know, and 9 times out of 10, It's because I've got something coming down on me from management or something from the owner, or the boat needs to be here, or the boat's broken and we've got a million things to do, or we're not within budget, or something's going on at home. So give them the professional courtesy and also give them the human courtesy and ask them, is something going on? You've been grouchier than you normally are, or you're drinking more than you normally do. Now, I know it's scary. I know it's scary as hell to approach a captain. I was junior crew once, and I remember looking at them thinking, oh my God, these guys driving these big, huge boats, there's no way they'll ever want to speak to me. There's no way that I can go to them. But you know what? It's scary as hell to stand here and to look at all of you and to bring up the topics that I'm bringing up right now, and to know that we're recording this and we're going to put it on the internet for the whole entire world to see. So who's going to critique me? Who's going to come at me and say, you shouldn't have said this or you shouldn't have said that? So I know it's scary to say something, but you have an obligation to do so. We have an obligation to try to make a positive change in this industry. So what do you do if it is them? Check in with your captain. Check in with management. If management's not being as supportive as they normally are and not giving you what you need like they normally do, ask them. Say, do you have some shit rolling downhill from you, from the owner or from the big boss? There's a good chance they do. Because I know that when my previous manager used to put me under the gun to run 4 charters back to back, drop charter off at noon, fuel up, and head back to Florida, and I would say, I can't. We're tired. We're exhausted. And he's a manager that was a great, great manager. And so I would ask him, why are you telling me? Why are you almost yelling at me and telling me that I have to be back as soon as I drop charter? Well, the boss wants the boat back behind his house. So there's always something, or there's a good chance, not always, but there's a good chance that something else is going on. So check in with your people. But if that's not it, and they really are a creep, they really are a bully, they really are a pervert, or they really just are a toxic or a sucky captain or a manager, you got to say something. You do. You have to. Because if you don't say something, you're perpetuating the problem. As hard as it is, you have to say something. And if you're worried about, well, if I say something and I get shit canned, then what? Well, if you've made a name for yourself and you work hard in this industry, I guarantee that if you get canned for speaking up, by the time you get to the end of the dock, you're going to have another job. And if you're junior crew or green crew or fresh crew, and that's the first boat that you've worked on, well, let me tell you, there's plenty other boats out there looking for crew, and we're building boats like mad right now. So you'll find another job. So don't let the fear of not finding another job or being blackballed not give you the opportunity to speak up. Now, I love this industry. I love my job. And as Holly introduced it, we see the glitz and the glam and all of the places that we get to go and the beautiful vessels that we work on and all of the people that we get to meet. So there, yes, and all I've been talking about for the last however many minutes is the sticky stuff, the stuff that nobody wants to talk about, but it's the reality. It's really what goes on below deck. But I love my job. And I can say there's never a day that I'm not eager to go to work or that I'm jumping out of bed. Sometimes I jump a little slower and not as high as other days, but I love my job. And I think it's safe to say that every single one of you in this room love the yachting industry as well, as much as I do, if not more, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't love the industry. One of my favorite things about the industry is the relationships that we make. Just you guys here for me today is so inspiring for me to keep me going and to keep me doing what I do. The relationships that we make with other crew members. I love my crew. Sometimes I want to choke them, but I love my crew. I've had some of the most amazing owners, some of the most amazing managers, the places that we get to go and travel to and the locals that we meet. Think of the awesome relationships that you have with the locals. Every single one of us in this room, if we went somewhere else in this world and we needed someone to lend a helping hand, there would be somebody there that we inadvertently knew, if we didn't know directly, that would help us. So that's what I love about this industry, is the relationships. It's not where we get to go, and it's not the boats that we get to work on, but it's the relationships that we get to make along the way. But there's no doubt, and I think it's safe to say, that the culture of yachting needs a facelift. And it might need more than a facelift. I think it might need a complete overhaul, because sometimes I think we're still back in the caveman days with some of our ways we do things, for lack of a better way of describing it. Some of the ways that we treat people and some of the responses that we have to certain things. I think we could use a little bit of an overhaul here. But the only way that you can do that is by becoming your own advocate. And as much as I say that captains and management companies are where, after I talked to numerous people in this industry, we decided were the who that had the ability to have the biggest impact, don't put this all on their shoulders. Because at the end of the day, the only person that's responsible for your well-being is you. So don't put it all on them, even though they wear a big part of the load. So the only way we're going to see a change is if we advocate for our own selves and our crewmates, and by speaking up. Scary? Like I said, I get it. It's scary to stand up here and say it. And I know if you're fresh into the industry and I remember what it was like to be 20 years old and to, well, I wasn't in the industry when I was 20, but I was still in my 20s when I started. The 20s are a bitch enough, let alone trying to go talk to some big figurehead on some great big boat. But if we love this industry like we do, we really can make it a better place. Here's how I know that we can make a change. And I held a seminar a couple of days ago, and it was a little different. It was more workshop-like, more discussion-oriented. And here's how I know we can make a difference, because after I posted some of it on social media, I got this text from a former crew member. And she says to me, "I was so nervous to go to my captain, but I did it, and had you not encouraged me to speak up, I never would have. What scares me is that I don't know where I'd be now if I hadn't. But what I do know now is that I am in a much better place because I did. The owners are happy, the captain and the rest of the crew are happy, and I'm happy." And this is what really resonates with me. Because you encouraged me to speak up, I now realize I have an obligation to encourage others to speak up when they're in a similar situation. We will see the change in our amazing industry that you're hoping for, Cap, even if it's just one crew member at a time. So if there's one thing that I want you to get from me rambling on for however many minutes now, is I want you to leave here feeling empowered to know that you can make a change and that you can speak up, and it's okay. And it might not be what you're thinking, negative and not getting another job or getting fired if you do. You might wind up in a better place. And probably the most resonating thing with me is before I started this seminar, somebody in this room pulled me aside and said, "I want you to know how much of a difference your social media posts make. And the one that you just made about toxic boats and leaving them, I think she said that she left hers and that made a difference." So I shared a story with you from a text I got just a couple days ago. This is somebody telling that each of us championing and encouraging each other to speak up and to speak out, just a few minutes ago said that we can make a difference and we can see a change in this industry. So I want to leave you with this. I'm sure that we've all heard this story before, but it's always a good one to share again. I call it the starfish story. So there's a man walking the beach. He walks the beach every morning before he starts his riding. That particular morning, it was a morning after a really big storm, and he noticed that the entire beach, from north to south, was littered with undersea life. And he sees off in the distance what looks to be a little boy walking along. He gets closer and he gets closer, and he notices every so often this little boy bends down to pick something up, and whatever he's picking up, he's chucking it into the ocean. He gets closer and he gets closer, gets to where he can speak to the little guy and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, all this undersea life washed up after the storm, and I'm throwing this starfish back into the sea because, well, if I don't, the sun will come high and they'll die." And the old man says, "There's got to be tens of thousands of starfish littering this whole entire beach. I'm afraid that you're not going to be able to make a difference." And the little boy reaches down, grabs his starfish, throws it into the sea, and looks at the old man, smiles, and says, "But I made a difference for that one." So my point is this: we can change this culture of this industry, making it more amazing than it already is, one crew member at a time. Thank you. Now, I know some of you were wiggling in your seats because I was saying some things that you wanted to say, comment on. So if you've got it, bring it. I'm all ears. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a course of action that crew can take in the cases where they do suffer consequences for coming forward?
That's a hard one to answer. So you're saying, so if you do go forward to like your captain and say somebody on board's being a bully and then you get fired because of that? If anybody in the audience has a better answer than me, please. Yes, thank you. Flag. Thank you. You're with Flag State, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
go ahead.
Because I think, so a lot of people aren't necessarily aware, they're worried about retaliation and what is my next step. It's not really broadcasted that much, but if you're a PYLC or you're a commercial boat and the flag inspector comes on, they're supposed to do crew interviews, and one of those things is making sure that you guys are aware of the contact for compliance side with Flag State. So that's essentially who you would reach out to, that if management wasn't doing anything, if the captain wasn't doing anything, flag can detain the boat, they can arrest the vessel, they can levy action against the vessel, and
How do we know who the person is to contact after that?
so it would generally be on the shipping register's website. And so they would have, so for instance, I represent Jamaica. For Jamaica, it would be Spence at jamaicaships.com, and he's the captain of safety and compliance.
And I can't say how important it is, one, at the get-go, make sure you have a contract for whatever boat you're on, okay? Because that lays out a lot. But then also, here's the thing is when I'm saying, advocate for yourself. You advocate for yourself, be responsible for yourself, and if you want to know, hey, is there a bullying policy? Is there a sexual harassment policy? Who can I call? How do I escalate something if it's going on? Ask. Awkward, is it? Yes, but ask. I mean, we're all grown adults here, and we are, at the end of the day, responsible for our own well-being. So if you can't ask your captain, ask your management. If you can't get it from your management, go to your Flag State. And it could be and if you don't know where to start, I mean, just look up Flag State's number and start squeaking, start calling. I always say the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
And their legal departments will also review your seafarer employment agreements for no cost to crew members.
And I want to say there's also too, there's a lot of resources out there that a lot of crew don't know about. So I mentioned iSwan. iSwan has a yacht crew help hotline where you can call in. Ladies, excuse me? Excuse me? So there is a hotline that you can call into, and that was what I was mentioning, the increase in calls that they got. So they're definitely a good starting point. There's Seize the Mind that offers mental health first aid. She would definitely be a good resource. Corinne Rayson of the Crew Coach, great resource. I mean, just general sexual abuse hotlines, just anything. There's a lot of great resources out there. Actually, I compiled a whole bunch of them and I put them on my website. So if you guys want to go to my website, there's a section on there that talks about mental health resources. Click on that, and I uploaded a bunch of them. a bunch of places that you can report. So like the Coast Guard has a reporting site, and then with MCA, they have a reporting place. There's Nautilus. Nautilus is a good support as well. So if you're not provided that information by your boat, just know that there is a place that you can go to escalate that issue.
I was on the verge of getting sacked because I have an owner who's selling, so I'm really hoping that he sells. When he drinks, he gets very inappropriate, and I didn't accept his advances, and so he wanted to sack me. But fortunately, my reviews from all of my guests have been really good. They like my food, and we've had very successful charters. So the captain was like, no ways. And how are you going to find a good chef in 4 days for our next charter? You know, and then the thing is that I spoke to my captain, who's amazing. We've got such a good crew, and I love my boat. And he said, you know, you need to speak to the DPA. And I was like, well, that's the best friend of the owner. And he was like, well, I wouldn't do that right now because it's going to cause too many waves, you know. And we're in a bit of a sticky situation. And
so you either make the waves or you let it have an effect on your own well-being, and then start a decline.
When the owner was on, thank God we only had one bus trip, but like when the owner's on, this is when it was happening, and all the stewardesses were also not happy about it. It's like, what do you do? Because if you go and speak to the captain, he speaks to the owner, like he's on board at the moment, like how do you navigate that kind of a situation? Like I said to him, I'm going to leave tomorrow, basically, if this doesn't stop. But he's like, I'm loyal to my captain, so I'm not going to leave my charter, you know.
But and that you're lucky that you have a good captain. You are. But then and it gets, I'm not going to lie, as a captain, it gets hard sometimes. Like I said, I mean, we've run back to back to back to back charters, and that story I shared about, you know, drop your guests at noon, fuel the boat, and get back home. When I'm telling my manager we're tired, we can't, but he's got the owner saying, well, I want my boat back behind the house, and I'm going, okay, why do we have a boss trip? No, he just wants it to look at. You know, I mean, but so let me just be real and tell you where I went with this. So, love my manager. I eventually, after 2 years of running 20 weeks of charter a year and 10 days off in that 2-year period, I left. It wasn't me that left. I took my whole crew. And the manager that had been with him for 50 years, he left too. So while we have some formal area to report instances such as this, it's also a bit of a cultural shift that's going to happen. And as more of us start standing up and speaking out, then chief stews that are bullies are going to realize they can't bully anymore. Chefs that chefs that are crazy, you know, chasing the girls around with a knife, which I just heard was a real thing yesterday. Emma from Seize the Mind was a guest speaker at my seminar just a couple days ago, and I'd never heard of a chef chasing another crew member around with a knife, but apparently Emma's been chased around with a knife. So, you know, the bullish chief stews, the crazy chefs, the grouchy engineers, you know, and the captains abusing their power. Yes, it's eventually they speak out. It's gonna snuff them out. They're, you know, the abuse of power and the bullying and the sexual harassment and these things that are going on because we're allowing it. They're going on, you know, because we're not saying something. So the more that we speak up, and I'm not saying this change is going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take a while to make this cultural shift, to make this adjustment in the industry. I mean, because that's really what we're trying to do is, yes, rules and regs, we're trying, you know, to bring things into place with flag state and having Nautilus and, you know, but it's hard. And I can't get too much into the legalities of it because, well, I'm a captain, but, and I don't understand all of the legalities on it. But the more of us, I do know, the more of us that speak up and speak out, it's going to suppress.
What would you do, for example, if you were that captain on that bus trip where your owner's essentially like sexually harassing or making the girls uncomfortable, you know, it's your boss. Like, do you go and speak to him? Like,
I'd go speak to him and I'd tell him to stop it. And he'd have one chance. I'd take the boat back to the marina, I'd dock it, and I'd take my stuff and my crew, and I'd say, peace out. That's what I'd do. Kind of on a smaller scale over my 2 years of not getting much of a break. I sat my manager down and I said, I'm going, my engineer's going, my first officer's going. And my manager that had been with the company for 50 years calls me up a month later and says, I'm gone too. That's it.
You need a captain with some balls, basically.
You do. You need a captain with some balls, but the rest of you crew need to grow some balls too.
Yeah.
Because as much of the responsibility is on our shoulders and also on management's shoulders, you guys got to take ownership for your own self as well. I mean, it's a lot. You know, have the gusto to say, you know what, I'm out, I'm done. You'll find another job. Trust me, you will. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? I can see so many of you want to say something. You're just not saying it.
I'll break the ice for you.
Go ahead.
One of your problems you've got in reality, and you mentioned yachting sector once, but industry many times, and actually it's not an industry, that's the problem. Yacht manufacture is an industry, but it's actually a lot of rich people with a lot of money who think they can throw it around and do what they want when they're on board, and it's not regulated. Chuffed to bits, you heard the flag state, but I'm sliding myself ever so slightly because I was parked down there about 6 weeks ago, and I twice during a 3-week period said to the owner, we're not doing that. And his wife said, the crew aren't tired. And I said, the crew are tired, and I'm bollocks as well, and we're not going around the bay this evening. I left the boat in San Rafael, went to the customs house, and I was thinking about Brendan O'Shaughnessy, who said to me once upon a time about frame of reference. Timmy said the first time I knew that my laundryman was in difficulty was when he jumped over the side with the gym weights on his ankles, because I wasn't into his frame of reference. So I went back to the boat, and the owner's wife was on the quarterdeck, and she said, Captain, can I have a word? I said, yeah, of course. She said, I've just asked her. She said, she's fine. And I said, I've just told you she's not. Anyway, he left the boat on the Saturday, and he phoned me on the Monday and said, don't come back.
Fine.
Point being is if you do stand up, you stand to lose your job. It's not bothering the slightest because I was doing it for a long anyway. But you need to get into the frame of reference of the crew. And the other thing that's really, really important in terms of when you talk about it, and you know my position better than many people, but 30 years ago my brother took his life, 3 years ago my son took his life.
Did you guys hear that? Can you say that louder, please?
So 30 years ago my brother took his life, and 3 years ago my son took his life. What you don't understand is the frame of reference of people, and it was only at my brother's funeral that I realised, because he left a suicide note to be opened at that time, that he was abused at school. So his bucket, stress container ship bucket, call it what you want, had a breeze block in it already. And a lot of the captains, and I know from my own experience as a captain, but only on a small boat, if you've got a shitty owner, who is shitty because they just can be, and you've got a management company that is more interested in the relationship between the shitty owner and them because it's money, and you've got a junior crew who you can't delegate down to, you've got an instantaneous bomb waiting.
Shit show.
And it's only a P that goes into that container that takes you over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what's filled the container, and yours is pretty full already. To the extent that when I flew home, I was next to an Egyptian guy who I had lunch with yesterday, and he was giving the stewardess a really hard time because there were so many people on board, they got the delivery of the drinks ahead of the lunch as opposed to the other way around. He needed, because he was in cancer treatment, a drink, but he was getting fed lunch and he didn't want it. Anyway, Sophie, who I've been talking to, was in a bit of a fluster, and I leant across to him and said, hey, I'm right with you. She was out of order the way she spoke to you, but you don't know that yesterday her aunt died. And he said, how do you know that? I said, I don't. But she might have done. Get into her frame of reference. And what you said, be nice to everybody, because firstly, there's no reason not to be, but secondly, what goes around comes around.
You know, and a good example that I've shared a couple of times now is my first officer didn't show up to work one day. My first officer has been with me for almost 3 years. Like, he's good. I'm biased. I think he's top of the line. I don't think you get any better than him. And he didn't show up, and I've got all this crap going on in my head as to what we got going on with the boat and what charters we got coming up and what the boss wants to do and just normal busy captain stuff in my head. So he doesn't show up to work, and so I'm instantly like, what the hell, where is he? I'm gonna, blah, blah, blah when he gets here. And my engineer speaks up and says, wait a minute, something's wrong. If he's not just showing up to work, something's wrong. So 2 things here. Feel free to check your captain. He did. He spoke up. He was like, hey, slow your roll here, And I was like, oh my God, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I get myself out of my head, about with everything that we've got coming at us and on our schedule. And sure enough, when I phone him up 2 or 3 times and he normally answers my call on the first ring, yeah, some stuff was going on. So there's a sense that there is. But, to answer your question, it's hard. Like I said, I think we're still a little archaic in some. Here's where we are with this. And some of them said no. And I said, well, some of us crew thinking that management's not doing anything is simply, you are, but you're not telling us that you did something. So I learned that. So I was able to share with them, well, hey, let us know, just keep us in the loop. But the other thing that I learned from management was that they said, we're management. We're not trained in how to deal with a crew member that comes to us that's maybe suicidal or that has been raped or accused of raping someone or the bullying situation. We're not trained in that. That was a light bulb moment for me as far as management. So think about that too. Then that sparked a whole conversation as to some things that they were doing internally. They're a huge management company as to what they're doing then in getting extra training and kinds of things for their managers because they are receiving those phone calls. Oftentimes management is the first stop for a crew member for when something like that happens. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for your time.
Oh, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie, so I've never been on a boat. I'm a physician assistant. And so I'm getting chills just listening to you because hearing the story one about the allergic reaction and somebody not having the time to get better, and didn't have an advocate there. It's like, hey, no, you need to let her rest or whatever. And nobody on the boat really to take care of the humans. And that's really what my business is going to be doing, is really just taking care of the people, the crew, maybe even, the guests or so on. But also the industry sounds a lot like the operating room.
Does it?
Yeah. It's kind of the same. We've got the surgeon, you've got the nurses and the techs and everybody else afraid to speak up if you've got a surgeon that's grumpy or yelling and screaming. But that's really changing a lot. And so from kind of what I read and research about the yachting world, you guys are so far behind.
We are. I giggle, but it's not funny. We are.
Not have medical care on the boats. There's no company that's dedicated to taking care of the humans. You have engineers taking care of engines. You've got.
Well, here's something. So I'm glad you spoke out. And I'm glad that you're getting involved in offering that service. And we're seeing more and more pop up. So we do have services like MedAir and MSOS that provide, and I know that I'm leaving some out and forgetting some, but we do have the services that provide our onboard medical kits and do provide training. Absolutely could. Yes. Could we as captains be drilling more? Yes. Do I wish that I'm going to take my flag state, which is U.S. flag state, and we're private, so there's like no rules and regs whatsoever. But do I wish there was sometimes more mandation that you have to drill on this many times? Yeah, I do, because when you're running 20 weeks of charter a year, I'm just going to be real, you know. But fortunately, you know, I try to sit and discuss with my crew, you know, okay, if we have a situation like this, or here's what we do have, and you know, and I'm on a boat now that has an owner that now is like, well, while you're in Monaco, if there's any classes you need to take them. So there's a lot of things in that. You know, I was in a position where I couldn't lead as I wanted to lead. I couldn't run my boat as I wanted because of the demands. So I left, and I found one. Do I have bills to pay? Do I have a mortgage? Oh yeah. Do I have a mom that's a little older that I have to send money back home to every month? Oh yeah. But at some point, you have to get within yourself and say, what is it that I will accept and will allow? You know, and I moved on to another boat. But going back to your point, so there are the medical suppliers out there, and there are more and more, thank goodness, people up like yourself, or Corinne, or Emma from Seize the Mind. I know Pearls of Wisdom. I know I'm leaving a bunch out, but they're popping up everywhere. And even myself, I'm screaming from the rooftops to anybody that's willing to listen, you know. And so they're out there, but you're right. I sometimes feel like we are back in the caveman days, you know, still dragging the ladies around by their ponytail, beating them with a club, you know. like, come on, you know.
And surgeons aren't allowed to scream at nurses in the operating room anymore. Before it was always hush because you will get fired and there's retaliation. Those are real things, but as we all speak up, especially the female side of things, surgeon, it's the same dynamic.
But that's my point, is
Now we're the
speaking up.
dominant ones,
Yeah.
right? So now if somebody acts like that, like they're shunned, like you're saying about an owner that would be shunned. So the industry's gonna know, don't work for that guy.
Yes. You know,
Instead of it
and
being
we'll
the other
see
way.
that shift. We'll see that despite what, you know, rules and regs can do and are doing and willing to do, and we all know that stuff takes a while. But again, it goes back to personal accountability and responsibility, and our responsibility to our the industry as a whole. As we step up and as we see something, like you're saying, you see that shift in the operating room now. You know, and the doctors aren't, you know, allowed to scream at the nurses anymore. And, you know, never that I've been a yeller and a screamer, you know, and I mean, my crew's been with me for a long time, but, you know, like I say, when I am stomping around the boat being a grouch, you know, they all feel, and I'm glad that they feel comfortable enough to say to me, you know, not in so many words, but what the hell's your problem? You know? So, yeah, so no, thank you for that.
I find that it's also, it depends on your captain or the owner mostly. Like my captain, we had a girl that wasn't well. We had a bus trip, and he got a local doctor to come on and treat her. But then I've heard about, I know someone that fell from a mast on a trip, and they made him lay in his bed and wait till the bus trip was over and gave him painkillers. So it depends, really.
Wow. Alex.
Sorry, I'd like to go back to your story. Quite admirable.
This is my engineer, and I have to give him huge kudos. Let me interrupt you, Alex. He, my whole crew's very supportive. I have my first officer, my deckhand, and my stew taking up the rear while we're in a huge shipyard period right now so that we can come and do this. He comes, he supports me. He carries my bags, he carries Ryan's camera, he carries the purse. He looks really cute doing so. So I just have to say thank you to them. But go ahead, Alex.
So, yeah, so actually going to that point, it's quite admirable what you did, standing up for your crew and stuff like that. What I wanted to accentuate, basically what she's saying, is that your crew, hopefully, I don't know if this is the case or not, but we do have to stand up for each other. Hopefully your crew would have, you know, basically stood behind you, and actually what I would have done is I would have left along, you know, since basically you were ousted from there, you know, and in support of that, to really send the message to the owner, hey, that's not right, and that's something that we have to do more in the industry. You know, it's just basically support yourself, but also help support others.
I absolutely agree, and I'm sure the Stu did look after me, but was not in a position to sort of save the day. But going back to the point, it's not
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
But it is regulated so much, and it's really refreshing that the flag stood up, because I don't think that as a junior deck you kind of get much about flag until something happens and captains worry about some inspections and things. But that ability to actually kind of go to somebody who's got a vested interest of looking after a section of an industry. I think we're a sector, not an industry. Lursen, Fedship, Ocean Co, they are industries because they make boats, and making boats is an industry. The snag is we're not an industry. If you've got a private boat and your US flag private, the guy can virtually do what he wants, unfortunately.
I always giggle when people talk about MLC and how they're allowed to, they have this many hours of work and this many hours of rest. And I'm like, well, apparently you have not worked on a US flagged private boat because, well, you know, but it's not just US flagged that goes to other ones as well. I think sometimes we could stand to take a page or two out of the commercial industries book. They've got their own issues as well, but I've had time and time again, well, this just recently happened. I had a fellow reach out to me telling me he wanted to go from commercial to yachting. He was ready for a new challenge, and I helped him get into a job, and he got into the job, and he goes, well, Cap, there's no rotation. And so at first I was like, well, you know, this is yachting, this is the way it is on smaller boats. Some of the, you know, as you get bigger into the better boats, you get that rotation and that better way of life. But then I thought for a second, I'm like, no, this doesn't have to be the way that it is. And maybe we should take a couple pages out of commercial industry's book as to the way that they handle work rest hours and rotation and that kind of thing. But to know that we're moving forward, I was just talking with a management company the other day that said he was so excited about the boat that he just took on, smaller boat, in relation, 47 meters, so not huge. That size boat doesn't always run rotation. And the owners came forward to him and said, hey, we can't figure out why we've had so much turnover in crew. Well, they said, our butlers and our house staff, our estate staff have been with us for 10 and 15 years. We treat everybody the same. But then it started dawning on the owners, and I would love to meet these owners, and I wish they would scream from the rooftops too about what they're doing. They said, can we try something? And they said, we know you don't see a lot in this size boat. How about we try it? And so now I'm just so excited that even a relatively smaller boat is going to try rotation. And it's been a few months now. They've gone rotation already. They've seen a complete shift in personality and happiness and work ethic and on and on and on and all of those positive things. This got me going into a can of worms, and I was like, you know, if somebody did a study on how much it actually costs to turn over, so let's say you turn over 3 stews a year. That stew comes on and she wants to make the interior hers. She wants to buy her things. She wants to feel like it's hers. How much money is that costing in the hiring process, the onboarding process, what she wants to change on board? And let's say you're rotating through 3 stews, or not rotating, let's say that you're going through 3 stews a year. That's probably almost the cost of what you have in a rotational employee. So he's going with a fully rotational crew. So when you're thinking, when I say I sometimes think we're behind the times and still in caveman days with some of our things, we are moving forward in some areas. And there's some really, really good owners out there. And I'm fortunate to have one now.
How do you handle your hours of rest? Because we all know we have to lie, because that's what we're told, and if we don't, then they don't accept it. And I've been on 3 boats, and as a chef, you totally get abused. You go to bed at 2 and you get woken up at 3 to shuck 100 oysters. You go to bed at 4 again. They wake you up at 5 for something else because they've been finding. Like, you go through 2 or 3 hours of sleep sometimes. Like, you can't have your hours back.
I got creative with mine. Fortunately, I've got a fairly multifaceted crew, and I've also got a crew that is very willing to jump in. One of my things that just grinds my gears is if any crew member says that's not my job. That just grates on me. So nobody says that. So having said that, my first officer, for example, is an amazing bartender. So we try to balance, going back to, I'll use my last boat as an example, we were busy charter. So we had 2 interior staff And so we would balance their hours so that they would get their 9 hours of rest. They would get a 2-hour break in between the day. We would rotate through them, but then if it started running too late into the night, then my first officer would go take a nap at some point in the day. He would get back up. He would tend bar. My engineer would jump in, and he's constantly doing excursions and launching toys on the back deck so that if my first officer does need to go take a nap to take up for the girls, then they will. What myself is I do the whole nighttime watch. So I don't sleep on anchor anyways, just because I'm a nervous Nelly about it, and I have, I'll be honest, a very terrible sleep cycle. So, and I would rather my crew be rested for the day that they have ahead of them. So I'll do all of watch myself, and I would come up around, I think I would come up around 11, take watch. My first officer would come up at 6, and then I would move the boat, and then I would just nap throughout the day. I'm never a solid 8-hour sleeper. That's just not me. So we got really creative, and I tried to have crew that were multifaceted. You know, the girls would go, or interior, I don't mean to say just girls, but it was girls on my team, would definitely go outside as well, and they would help with excursions. They would help with toys when they could. You know, we repositioned the boat. We get all salty. I would rinse it down for the guys so that they didn't have to do that. So I'm a lot more hands-on, a lot more, and I think maybe you'll start to see a shift with that too, with captains in terms of this, I'm the captain, I shouldn't have to do that anymore, you know? So that's how I managed it.
How would you manage with your chef? Like, I get it, like I help my stew, or she might help me walk.
So he or she would do breakfast, and as soon as breakfast was done and cleared, he went down and slept. Would then, come back up, get lunch going and done, go back down and sleep. Come back up, do dinner, and then go down and sleep for the night if they could. And then my girls or my first officer that could bartend, if there was a guest up late at night and one of us could get that guest something, or even if I'm up late at night and I hear them wrestling about and they want something, if it's something I can't cook to save my life, but if there's something that I can get them, then I'll do it. So we all were very much a team effort and very much worried about, you know, who was sleeping or who couldn't sleep, or if he's going, I'm wound up, you know, I can't sleep right now, or I got a good nap underway, you go sleep. That's how we did it. Yes?
Well, I think one of the other things that the industry just needs to get on board with as a whole is, especially for smaller boats with less crew, having restricted hours of service for a charter. Because especially if you're a charter boat and you're going 4 months charter back to back and the crew's not getting rest, it's towards the end of the charter season you're seeing crew members getting injured from lack of sleep. Like, things are happening where the owner might feel incentivized that, oh well, I'm just going to offer 24-hour service to anybody that's chartering the boat, over and over.
I cut it off. That's a really good point. I cut it off, and it was usually dependent. I tried to adjust it, guest to guest to guest. But let me go back. Let me digress for a minute. I also had a really good charter manager. So she was very in tune to how we ran and matching us with people, but I'd cut it off. And 2 a.m. was time to go to bed, guys. Clean up, let's go, Yeah. I was not 24 hours. So I'm being told that I can't spend the rest of the day talking about this. But I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. Really, really, when I stand up here and I do things like this, I ask myself, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And knowing that, like I said, that this goes out to the world, and it takes balls. So thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting me, because it keeps me going, it keeps me inspired, it really does, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. But even as a human too, I need that little push, and you guys are that push for me. So thank you so much.